The rain came down hard that evening, turning the city streets into rivers of light as car headlights reflected off the wet pavement. Jordan Hayes stepped out of his office building and paused under the large glass awning, watching sheets of water pour from the sky. At 42, Jordan had built his tech company from a dorm room idea into a billion-dollar empire, but days like today still drained him. The board meeting had been particularly rough. Talks of another acquisition, more responsibility, more wealth that somehow never filled the emptiness he carried. "Your car will be here in 3 minutes, sir," his assistant called from the doorway, already heading back inside to finish up the day's work. Jordan nodded, adjusting his custom-tailored suit jacket and checking his watch, a simple yet elegant timepiece that cost more than most people's cars. He wasn't flashy with his wealth, but quality was something he never compromised on. That's when he noticed the small figure huddled against the building's stone exterior, just beyond the protection of the awning, a child, soaked through with dark curly hair plastered to her head, wearing a thin jacket much too small for her small frame. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Jordan looked around for a parent or guardian, but the sidewalk was nearly empty, except for hurried professionals rushing through the downpour. The security guard at the door was busy helping an executive into a waiting town car. The girl looked up and their eyes met. Hers were large, intelligent, and held a wariness that struck Jordan as too old for her years. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his expensive coat, polished shoes, and the way the security guard had nodded respectfully as he passed. Then, with a decisiveness that caught him off guard, she pushed herself off the wall and walked straight toward him. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was small but clear, with a hint of an accent he couldn't place. "Can I go home with you?" Jordan's briefcase froze midway to his side, suspended in the moment of shock that washed over him. Those 7 words hit him like a physical force, unlocking something he'd kept buried for decades. "What did you say?" he asked, though he'd heard her perfectly well. The girl didn't flinch or back away. "I asked if I could go home with you. I don't have anywhere to go tonight, and you look like you have a nice home." The directness of her request, completely lacking in self-pity, sent Jordan back 30 years to a county office where he'd sat on a plastic chair, a 10-year-old boy with a garbage bag of belongings, asking a social worker with the same directness where he would sleep that night. "Where are your parents?" Jordan asked, kneeling down to her level, rain now splashing onto his Italian leather shoes. She shrugged, a gesture too casual for the weight of her answer. "Don't have any. I ran away from my foster home this morning." She glanced over her shoulder, quickly, as if expecting to be grabbed at any moment. "They won't look very hard for me anyway." Jordan felt his chest tighten. He knew the system well enough to know she might be right. "I'm Amara," she offered, extending a small hand with chipped nail polish on 2 fingers. "I'm Jordan," he replied, taking her hand automatically. Her fingers were ice cold. "Amara, I can't just take you home. There are rules, laws." "You've got that look," she interrupted, studying his face with unsettling intensity. "You were in the system too, weren't you?" The question stunned him into silence. Jordan had spent millions crafting his public image as a self-made success, a story that conveniently skipped over the foster homes and group facilities that had shaped his childhood. Yet this soaking wet child had seen through him in seconds. "Mr. Hayes, your car has arrived," the security guard called from the curb, where a sleek black car had pulled up. Jordan glanced at the waiting car, then back at Amara. Her chin was raised, slightly, bracing for rejection, but her eyes held a spark of hope she couldn't quite hide. "Wait here," he told her, then walked to his driver. "James, there's been a change of plans. I need you to make a stop before we head back to the penthouse." "Of course, sir. Where to?" Jordan hesitated. Protocol said to call the police or child services immediately. His lawyer would have a fit if he knew what Jordan was considering. The girl could be making up stories. This could be some elaborate setup. But the memory of those overcrowded group homes, the feeling of being just another case number, it all came rushing back. He couldn't send her back into that system, at least not tonight, not without making sure she'd be okay. We need to stop for some dry clothes and food, Jordan said finally, and call Mrs. Chen to prepare the guest room. James raised an eyebrow but nodded. Very good, sir. Jordan returned to Amara, who hadn't moved an inch, rain continuing to soak her already drenched clothes. I can't promise anything long-term, he told her honestly, but you can come home with me tonight. We'll get you warm, fed, and figure things out in the morning. The relief that washed over her face was so powerful it made his throat tight. She didn't jump or shout with joy. Instead, her shoulders simply lowered an inch as if she'd been carrying the weight of the world on them. Thank you, she said simply. As they walked to the car, Jordan pulled off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. It swallowed her completely, the sleeves hanging well past her hands. Mr. Hayes. His phone buzzed with his assistant's voice as they settled into the back seat. The investors from Tokyo are expecting your call in 20 minutes to finalize the terms. Jordan looked at Amara, who was trying not to stare in awe at the car's leather interior, her fingers lightly touching the warm seat as if it might disappear. Tell them we'll have to reschedule for tomorrow, he replied. But sir, we've been trying to lock this deal for months. It can wait until tomorrow, Diane. After hanging up, Jordan noticed Amara watching him closely. Are you in trouble because of me? She asked softly. No, he assured her. Sometimes other things are more important than business. As they pulled away from the curb, Jordan felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, the constant pressure of meetings, acquisitions, and stock prices faded into the background. Instead, the most pressing question in his mind was much simpler. What kind of food would an 8-year-old girl like for dinner? The rain continued to pour outside, but inside the car, something that had been frozen in Jordan for a very long time began, ever so slightly, to thaw. The elevator ride to Jordan's penthouse was silent. Amara stood perfectly still, her small, hands clutching the edges of Jordan's oversized jacket, eyes fixed on the rising floor numbers. They had stopped briefly at a department store, where Jordan had quickly purchased some dry clothes, toiletries, and a pair of fuzzy slippers that had made Amara's eyes light up for just a moment before she carefully masked her reaction. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Mrs. Chen was already waiting. The older woman had been Jordan's housekeeper for nearly a decade, managing his home with quiet efficiency and a warmth he'd come to rely on more than he would admit. Mr. Hayes, she said, her eyes immediately going to the small figure beside him. If she was surprised, she hid it well. I've prepared the guest room as requested. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. This is Amara. She'll be staying with us tonight. Jordan placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. Amara, this is Mrs. Chen. She makes the best hot chocolate in the city. Amara looked up at the woman, her guard still firmly in place. Nice to meet you, she said softly. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. You're soaked through, child. Let's get you warmed up. She held out her hand, but didn't force Amara to take. But after a moment's hesitation, Amara slipped her small hand into Mrs. Chen's and allowed herself to be led toward the guest bathroom. I've laid out towels and run a warm bath, Mrs. Chen explained as they walked away. And I'll heat some soup while you get cleaned up. Once they disappeared down the hallway, Jordan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his damp hair. What was he thinking? He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over his lawyer's contact. Richard would tell him the sensible thing to do: call Child Protective Services immediately. This wasn't just unusual, it was potentially illegal. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Diane before he could decide. Mr. Hayes, the Tokyo investors are extremely displeased. They're threatening to walk. Jordan pinched the bridge of his nose. Offer them the exclusive licensing agreement they wanted for the Asian market. 10-year term instead of 5. That's worth millions in potential revenue. Just do it, Diane. I'll explain tomorrow. After hanging up, Jordan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city below. Rain streaked across the glass, blurring the lights into watercolor smudges. He'd built his company from nothing, fighting his way, out of a system that had written him off. Now he had everything: the view, the penthouse, more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Yet most evenings, he stood at these same windows feeling like an observer of life rather than a participant. "Mr. Hayes." Jordan turned to find Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She had bruises on her arms, Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Old ones, and she's far too thin." Something cold settled in Jordan's stomach. "Did she say anything about it?" "No, she doesn't talk much, but she asked if she would need to leave tomorrow." Mrs. Chen paused. "I told her that was up to you." Jordan nodded, turning back to the window. The right thing to do was clear. Call the authorities, let them handle it. That was the sensible legal approach. Yet he couldn't shake the memory of Amara's direct gaze, the way she'd spotted something in him that most adults missed. "I've laid out her clothes to dry," Mrs. Chen continued, "and made up the blue guest room. She's having soup in the kitchen now." "Thank you," Jordan said, meaning it more than usual. Mrs. Chen lingered, something unusual for her efficient manner. "She reminds me of someone," she said finally. Jordan didn't need to ask who. Mrs. Chen had seen the few childhood photos he kept locked in his desk drawer. She knew enough of his story to fill in the blanks. "I'll call social services in the morning," Jordan said, more to convince himself than her. Mrs. Chen simply nodded and left, the gentle rebuke in her silence more effective than any words. When Jordan entered the kitchen, he found Amara sitting at the counter, swimming in one of his old Harvard t-shirts that Mrs. Chen had repurposed as a nightgown. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, and she was carefully spooning hot soup into her mouth, blowing on each spoonful with exaggerated care. "Feeling better?" Jordan asked, taking the stool beside her. She nodded, not looking up from her bowl. "Thank you for the clothes and the slippers." Her voice was small but steady. "You're welcome." Jordan watched her eat for a moment. "Amara, can you tell me a bit more about where you came from today? I need to know if someone's looking for you." Her spoon paused midway to her mouth. "No one's looking very hard." She set the spoon down carefully. "I was at the Westbrook home. It's my 3rd place this year." Jordan knew the name, a larger group facility on the city's west side that took overflow cases when traditional foster placements fell through. "Why did you run away?" he asked gently. Amara shrugged, a gesture that tried to appear casual but couldn't quite hide the tension in her small shoulders. "Ms. Tate said I asked too many questions, said I'm difficult." She traced a pattern on the countertop with her finger. "The older kids take the little kids' food, and sometimes things get broken or people." The matter-of-fact way she delivered this last line made Jordan's chest tighten. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Not bad enough for a hospital," she answered, her focus still on the invisible pattern she was tracing. "Just bad enough to know to stay out of the way next time." Jordan swallowed hard against the rising anger. He knew exactly what she meant, the careful calculus of survival he'd mastered himself as a child. "How did you end up outside my building?" he asked. "I took the bus downtown. I had some money saved." She finally looked up at him. "I watched people all day. Most rushed past. Some gave me dollar bills without looking at me. You were the first person who looked safe." The simple trust in that statement felt like both a gift and a terrible responsibility. "Amara, I need to make some calls tomorrow about finding you a proper place to stay." Her face remained neutral, but something dimmed in her eyes. "I understand," she said, far too adult in her resignation. "Can I finish my soup first?" "Of course, and you'll stay here tonight. Get some rest." Jordan hesitated. "I promise I'll make sure you're safe, wherever you go next." She nodded, clearly not believing him, but too polite or too experienced in disappointment to say so. Later, after Mrs. Chen had settled Amara into the blue guest room with its ocean-themed decor left over from Jordan's niece's last visit, Jordan sat in his home office staring at his computer screen. He'd pulled up the contact information for Child Protective Services, but instead found himself searching for information on the Westbrook home. The facility had decent reviews on paper, but digging deeper revealed concerning patterns: high staff, turnover, several incidents that had been quietly resolved, chronic underfunding. Nothing outright damning, but enough to raise red flags to someone who knew what to look for. Jordan's phone buzzed again. Richard, his lawyer, returning his earlier call. "Jordan, what's this emergency? Diane mentioned something about a child." Jordan sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I've got a situation, Rich. A foster kid approached me today, asked to come home with me." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Please tell me you called CPS immediately," Richard finally said. "She's sleeping in my guest room." "Jesus, Jordan. Do you have any idea how many laws you could be breaking? Not to mention the potential PR nightmare. The board would have a field day with this. She has bruises, Rich, and she's terrified of going back." "That's for the authorities to handle, not you. You're not qualified, and frankly, your history makes you too close to this. Call CPS first thing tomorrow." Jordan stood, walking to the window again. "What if I don't? What if I look into temporary guardianship?" Richard's laugh was short and disbelieving. "You? A single workaholic bachelor with no childcare experience? The courts would never approve it, and the board would question your judgment. We're in the middle of the biggest acquisition in company history." Everything Richard said made perfect sense. It was logical, practical advice. And yet, when Jordan passed the guest room on his way to bed and saw Amara's small form curled tightly under the covers, one hand clutching the edge of the blanket to her chin even in sleep, logic seemed suddenly less important than it had an hour ago. In the morning, he told himself. He would make the right calls in the morning, but as he lay awake in his own bed staring at the ceiling, Jordan couldn't help wondering what right really meant in this situation, and why, for the first time in years, his enormous penthouse no longer felt quite so empty. 1 week turned into 2, and still Jordan hadn't made the call to Child Protective Services. Each morning he woke with the intention of doing the sensible thing. Each evening he found another reason to wait just one more day. "We need to enroll her in school," Mrs. Chen announced on the 10th day, placing a cup of coffee in front of Jordan as he reviewed quarterly reports at the kitchen island. "Children need structure." Jordan looked up, startled. "School? But that would mean that you've made a decision?" Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. "You made it the moment you brought her home, Mr. Hayes. The paperwork is just catching up to your heart." Before Jordan could argue, Amara padded into the kitchen in her now favorite outfit, leggings and an oversized sweater Jordan had bought during their emergency shopping trip. Her hair was styled in 2 neat puffs that Mrs. Chen had learned to create from watching online tutorials late at night. "Good morning," she said quietly, climbing onto the stool beside Jordan. "Morning, kiddo. Sleep okay?" Jordan had found himself adopting a new vocabulary over the past 2 weeks. Words like kiddo and sweetheart that had never been part of his lexicon before. Amara nodded, accepting the bowl of oatmeal Mrs. Chen placed before her. "I finished that book about the girl who finds a secret door." "Already? I just got it for you yesterday." Jordan couldn't hide the pride in his voice. The first weekend, he'd discovered Amara reading the back of a cereal box with such concentration that he'd immediately ordered dozens of children's books. Since then, she'd devoured them at an astonishing rate. "It was good," Amara said simply. The girl was brave. Jordan's phone buzzed, a video call from the office. He hesitated, looking at Amara. "Take your call," she said with that uncanny perception. "I'll be quiet." Jordan accepted the call. "Morning, Diane." His assistant's face appeared on screen, already looking harried despite the early hour. "Mr. Hayes, the board is assembled and waiting. The Tokyo deal is stalling, and they're demanding explanations about why you've missed 3 in-person meetings this week." Jordan felt Amara go still beside him, her spoon pausing midway to her mouth. "I'll be there in an hour," he said, ending the call before Diane could protest. Amara carefully set down her spoon. "Are you in trouble because of me?" It was the same question she'd asked that first night in the car. Then, Jordan had been able to brush it off. Now, 2 weeks later, the answer was more complicated. No, he said firmly. The board just likes to feel important. It's nothing I can't handle. Amara studied him with those two wise eyes. You're the boss. Why are they mad at you? Jordan smiled despite himself. Being the boss doesn't mean everyone always agrees with you. Sometimes it just means more people to argue with. This earned him a small smile, a still rare occurrence that felt like winning the lottery each time. Will I have to leave while you're at work? Amara asked, the question casual but the tension in her shoulders anything but. No. Mrs. Chen will be here. Jordan hesitated. But we should talk about school soon. Hope flickered across her face before she carefully masked it. Okay. An hour later, Jordan sat at the head of the conference table, half listening as his CFO detailed the financial implications of the Tokyo investors' new demands. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, a photo of Amara sitting in the window seat he'd never used, deeply engrossed in another book. Mr. Hayes? Jordan looked up to find the entire board staring at him. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Richard, his lawyer, frowned. I said, the investors are concerned about your focus lately. Rumors are circulating about changes in your personal life. Jordan set down his phone. My personal life has never affected my ability to run this company. Until now, said Victor Blakely, the oldest board member and the one who had most resisted Jordan's leadership from the beginning. You've missed key meetings, delegated critical negotiations, and now we hear you have a child living in your home? An unauthorized foster placement, if reports are correct? The room went silent. Jordan felt a cold anger rise in him. You've had me investigated? The board has a responsibility to protect company interests, Victor replied smoothly. A CEO, potentially breaking the law, raises obvious concerns. Jordan looked around the table at the faces of people he'd worked with for years. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few openly hostile. Amara is staying with me temporarily while I sort out a legal guardianship situation, Jordan said carefully. My personal affairs don't concern this board unless they affect company performance, but they have affected performance, Victor pressed. The Tokyo deal is hanging by a thread because you rescheduled at the last minute. The merger talks have stalled because you've been leaving the office by 6 every day. This isn't the Jordan Hayes who built this company. Before Jordan could respond, the conference room door burst open. His assistant Diane hurried in, looking flustered. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but... She stopped, looking horrified. She was right behind me, I swear. Who was? Jordan began, but then froze as he saw who entered the room. Jordan, is that you, honey? Eleanor Hayes stood in the doorway, elegant, as always in a tailored pantsuit, her silver-streaked hair swept into a perfect chignon. Jordan hadn't seen his mother in nearly 3 years, not since their last argument about his empty life. Mother, he managed, what are you doing here? Eleanor swept into the room as if she owned it, nodding regally to the board members. When my son stops returning my calls for 2 weeks, I book a flight. Sorry to interrupt your meeting, gentlemen, but family comes first. She fixed her gaze on Jordan. At least that's what I've always tried to teach him. The irony of this statement from a woman who had chosen career over custody of her only child was not lost on Jordan. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. We'll continue this discussion later, he told the board, then gestured for his mother to precede him out of the room. In the privacy of his office, Jordan turned to Eleanor. You can't just show up like this. I wouldn't have to if you returned my calls, she countered. Your assistant has been giving me the runaround for days. Then I hear from Caroline Blakely at the foundation gala that my son has suddenly become a father? To a foster child? Jordan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. It's complicated. It too always is with children, Eleanor said, her voice softening unexpectedly. Tell me about her. The simple request, free of judgment, caught Jordan off guard. He found himself sinking into his office chair, telling his mother about the rainy night. Amara's direct question, the bruises, her brilliance with books, her careful way of eating as if food might be taken away at any moment. Eleanor listened, without interrupting, an unusual restraint for her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You always did have your father's heart," she said finally. "Too big for your own good." "I don't know what I'm doing," Jordan admitted. "The system failed her just like it failed me. But I'm not equipped to raise a child." "No one is," Eleanor said with a small laugh. "You think I knew what I was doing? With you? Children don't come with instructions, Jordan. They come with needs and hearts that trust too easily. The board thinks I'm losing focus." "The board can go to hell," Eleanor said crisply. "You built this company from nothing. They work for you, not the other way around." Jordan stared at his mother, this sudden ally he hadn't expected. "I should call child services. It's the right thing to do. Is it?" Eleanor stood, smoothing her already perfect suit. "Take me to meet her. Then decide what's right." That evening, Jordan watched in amazement as his formidable mother sat cross-legged on the living room floor, helping Amara build an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and sheets. Mrs. Chen moved around them, secretly snapping photos on her phone that Jordan knew would end up texted to him later. "Your mom is nice," Amara whispered when Eleanor went to the kitchen for more snacks. "She knows how to make the best forts." "She does," Jordan agreed, surprised by this revelation about a woman he thought he knew. Later, after Amara had fallen asleep on the couch during movie night and been carried to bed by Jordan, Eleanor sat across from him on the terrace, nursing a glass of wine. "She's remarkable," she said simply. "Yes," Jordan agreed. "And you've already fallen in love with her," Eleanor added. It wasn't a question. Jordan looked out at the city lights. "I've only known her 2 weeks. Time doesn't matter with children," Eleanor said softly. "I loved you the moment I saw you, even though I made a mess of showing it." The rare vulnerability from his always composed mother struck Jordan speechless. "I wasn't there for you when the system failed you," Eleanor continued, her voice thick with rare emotion. "I was too caught up in my own grief after your father died, too focused on survival. By the time I got my act together, you were so angry with me." "Mom, no, let me finish. I made choices I regret every day. But you have a chance here, Jordan. A chance to break the cycle." She leaned forward. "That child needs someone who sees her, really sees her. And for whatever reason she picked you. The board thinks I'm distracted, the investors are threatening to walk. So let them," Eleanor said simply. "You have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. Maybe it's time to build something more important than another tech company." Jordan looked at his mother. Really looked at her for the first time in years. "When did you get so wise?" Eleanor laughed, the sound lighter than he remembered. "Around the time I realized I'd missed watching my son become an extraordinary man." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Don't make my mistakes. Jordan, some things matter more than boardrooms and balance sheets." That night, after Eleanor had gone to her hotel and the penthouse was quiet, Jordan sat at his computer again. But instead of pulling up Child Protective Services, he found himself searching for information on legal guardianship, adoption processes, and schools with programs for gifted children. Outside Amara's door, he paused, listening to her soft, even breathing. 2 weeks ago, his life had made perfect sense. Lonely, perhaps, but orderly and predictable. Now it was chaos. Board disputes, investor threats, and tiny shoes by the front door. Strangely, for the first time in decades, it also felt right. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Amara had asked that life-changing question, in the rain. Jordan was in the kitchen helping her pack lunch for her first day at Westridge Academy, a private school that had agreed to admit her mid-term after she'd aced their entrance assessments. "Turkey or ham?" Jordan asked, holding up 2 sandwich options. "Turkey, please," Amara replied, carefully arranging colored pencils in her new backpack. Her hair was styled in neat braids that Mrs. Chen had mastered after many practice sessions. Jordan's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hayes speaking. "Mr. Hayes, this is Darlene Wilson from Child Protective Services." Jordan's hand froze on the sandwich. He turned away from Amara, lowering his voice. "Yes, Ms. Wilson? We've received reports that you have a minor child in your custody without proper authorization. A child matching the description of Amara Johnson, who was reported missing from Westbrook home 3 weeks ago. Jordan's heart hammered in his chest. I can explain. I'll need to see the child immediately and return her to appropriate care, Ms. Wilson continued, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. I can be at your residence within the hour. We were just about to leave for her first day of school, Jordan said, watching Amara carefully zip her backpack, oblivious to the conversation that threatened to upend her world again. School? Ms. Wilson's voice sharpened. Mr. Hayes, you have no legal authority to enroll this child in any educational institution. I strongly advise you to cooperate fully to avoid criminal charges of child endangerment and custodial interference. The words hit Jordan like physical blows. I understand. We'll be here. After hanging up, he stood frozen, the half-made sandwich still in his hand. Is everything okay? Amara asked, her intuition as sharp as ever. Jordan forced a smile. Just a work thing. Listen, sweetheart, there's been a change of plans. School might need to wait until tomorrow. Disappointment flashed across her face before she carefully composed her features. That's okay. Did I do something wrong? No, absolutely not, Jordan said firmly, kneeling to her level. A lady from Child Services is coming to talk to us. Remember how I said we needed to make things official? This is part of that process. Amara's eyes widened. Are they taking me back? I don't know, Jordan answered honestly. But I promise I'm going to do everything I can to keep you here with me, if that's what you want. She nodded solemnly. It is. Jordan made a quick call. To Richard, his voice tight with urgency. I need you at my penthouse now. CPS is coming for Amara. To Richard's credit, he arrived before Ms. Wilson, legal briefcase in hand. This isn't going to be easy, he warned Jordan in the foyer. You've technically been harboring a missing child. I've been protecting her, Jordan countered. You haven't seen the bruises, heard the things she's told me about that place. Richard's expression softened slightly. I believe you, but the system doesn't work on belief, it works on documentation and procedure, neither of which you've followed. The elevator chimed, announcing Ms. Wilson's arrival. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense bun and sensible shoes. Her eyes swept the penthouse with thinly veiled judgment. Mr. Hayes, I presume, she said, not offering her hand. And you are? She turned to Richard. Richard Brennan, Mr. Hayes' attorney, he replied smoothly. I believe we can resolve this situation amicably. Ms. Wilson's expression suggested she doubted this. Where is the child? Her name is Amara, Jordan said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. And she's in the living room with my housekeeper. In the large, sunlit living room, Amara sat on the couch beside Mrs. Chen, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She'd changed out of her new school clothes into a simple t-shirt and jeans, as if already preparing for a return to Westbrook. Hello, Amara, Ms. Wilson said, her voice softening slightly. Do you remember me? We met at Westbrook last year. Amara nodded, not speaking. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest. Has Mr. Hayes been taking good care of you? Yes, Amara said quietly. He got me books, and Mrs. Chen makes sure I eat vegetables. Despite the tension, Jordan felt a smile tug at his lips. Has anyone hurt you here, or made you feel unsafe? Ms. Wilson continued. Amara shook her head emphatically. Never. Why did you run away from Westbrook, Amara? For the first time, Amara hesitated, her eyes darting to Jordan. He nodded encouragingly. The big kids were hurting the little ones, she said finally. And when I told Ms. Tate, she said I was making trouble again. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a fading bruise on her upper arm. Bradley did this because I wouldn't give him my dinner. Ms. Tate said I needed to learn to share. Jordan saw Ms. Wilson's professional facade crack slightly. I've documented all the marks I observed when Amara first arrived, Mrs. Chen said, handing over a folder with photographs and detailed notes. I was a registered nurse before I retired. Ms. Wilson accepted the folder, flipping through it with a deepening frown. This is concerning, but it doesn't change the legal situation. Mr. Hayes has no custody rights. I want to apply for emergency guardianship, Jordan said firmly. I've already started the paperwork. Ms. Wilson shook her head. Emergency guardianship is for relatives, Mr. Hayes. You have no relationship to this child. He's the only one. Who stopped to help me? Amara interjected suddenly, her voice stronger than before. Doesn't that count as a relationship? The room fell silent, the simple wisdom of her question hanging in the air. I'm afraid it doesn't, legally speaking, Ms. Wilson said gently. Amara, I need you to pack your things. I'll be taking you to a different placement today, not back to Westbrook. No. The word came from Jordan, surprising even himself with its force. I'm not letting her go back into a system that already failed her once. Richard placed a warning, hand on Jordan's arm. What my client means is that we intend to file for temporary guardianship immediately. We request that Amara remain here while the courts review the application. Ms. Wilson's expression hardened. That's not how this works. The child comes with me today. You can file whatever paperwork you want afterward. Actually, Richard countered, pulling documents from his briefcase. We filed an emergency petition with the family court this morning. Judge Hernandez has granted a 72-hour stay, during which Amara can remain in Mr. Hayes' care pending an initial hearing. Jordan stared at his lawyer in shock. Richard had never mentioned filing any petition. Ms. Wilson took the papers, scanning them with narrowed eyes. This is highly irregular. So is a child with documented injuries being returned to the system that caused them. Richard replied smoothly. The judge agreed that Amara's best interests might be served by maintaining her current stable environment until a proper hearing can be conducted. After a tense silence, Ms. Wilson tucked the papers into her bag. Very well, but I'll be conducting a full home inspection today, and I expect to see Amara at the hearing on Friday morning. She turned to Jordan. This doesn't mean you've won anything, Mr. Hayes. The courts rarely grant guardianship to single men with no childcare experience and demanding careers. After the inspection and Ms. Wilson's departure, Jordan found Amara sitting in the window, seat staring out at the city below. Hey, he said softly, sitting beside her. You okay? Amara nodded, not looking at him. I packed my bag just in case. She pointed to a small backpack by the door ready for a quick departure. The sight broke Jordan's heart. You don't need to do that. It's okay, she said with that terrible maturity. I knew I couldn't stay forever. Amara, look at me, Jordan said, waiting until she turned her solemn face to his. I'm going to fight for you. With everything I have, I want you to stay here to be part of my family. Hope flickered in her eyes, but caution quickly tamped it down. The lady said they don't give kids to people like you. People like me? Single men with big jobs, Amara clarified. And I heard her tell the other lady on the phone that it looks bad that you're white and I'm black, that people might think wrong things. Jordan felt a flash of anger at the system's assumptions, at the barriers already being erected. Do you think I care about you less because we have different skin colors? Amara shook her head. No, but grown-ups make things complicated sometimes. They sure do, Jordan agreed with a sigh. But here's something simple. I love you, Amara. You walked into my life 3 weeks ago and changed everything, for the better. I'm not giving up on that without a fight. For the first time since Ms. Wilson's arrival, Amara's careful composure cracked. She leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Jordan's neck in a fierce hug. I love you too, she whispered against his shoulder. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of legal meetings, character witnesses, and financial disclosures. Jordan's mother flew back into town, bringing with her a stack of photo albums showing Jordan's childhood before the system. Evidence, she said, that he understood what a loving home should look like. The media somehow caught wind of the story. Tech billionaire fights for foster child splashed across the business section, complete with speculation about Jordan's motives. Victor Blakely wasted no time calling an emergency board meeting. This publicity is damaging our brand, he argued. as Jordan sat stony-faced at the head of the table. Investors are questioning your judgment, your focus. The Tokyo deal is officially dead. I'm aware, Jordan replied calmly. Then you understand why the board is concerned about your ability to continue as CEO during this personal crusade. Jordan looked around the table at faces he'd worked alongside for years. I built this company from nothing. I've given it 15 years of my life, sacrificed relationships, family, everything for its success. He leaned forward. But if you're asking me to choose between Amara and this company, it's not even a contest. A shocked silence fell over the room. No one is asking you to choose, Diane said from her place at the side of the room. At least not all of us. She shot Victor a pointed look. The publicity isn't all negative, another board member added, hesitantly. Social media is largely supportive. Our younger demographic especially sees this as aligned with our company values of empowerment and breaking barriers. Victor scoffed. Social media doesn't drive stock prices. Actually, Diane interjected, our stock is up 3 points since the story broke. The debate continued, but Jordan had already mentally checked out. He had more important concerns than stock prices or board politics. Friday's hearing loomed, and with it Amara's fate, and his own, hung in the balance. That night, unable to sleep, Jordan found himself checking on Amara around midnight. Her bed was empty. Panic seized him for a moment until he noticed her small backpack was gone too. A folded piece of paper lay on her pillow. With trembling hands, Jordan opened it. Dear Jordan, it read in careful handwriting. Thank you for being so nice to me. I heard you fighting with the important people about me. I don't want to make trouble for you. You have a big company to run. I will be okay. Please don't worry. Love, Amara. Jordan's world collapsed into a pinpoint of fear. She was out there, somewhere, alone in the city at midnight. He ran to the elevator, punching the button for the lobby with frantic energy. Mr. Hayes, the night security guard, looked up in surprise as Jordan burst from the elevator. A little girl, my daughter, did you see her leave the building? The guard shook his head. No one's come down in hours. If she hadn't gone down... Jordan looked up. The roof garden. Amara had fallen in love with it their first week, helping Mrs. Chen plant herbs in the raised beds. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, Jordan burst onto the roof, scanning desperately in the dim lighting. There, in the farthest corner by the small greenhouse, a small figure sat huddled on a bench. Amara, he called softly, relief flooding through him. She looked up, her face wet with tears. I was trying to leave, she said. But I got scared of the dark. I'm sorry. Jordan crossed the roof in seconds, gathering her into his arms. Don't ever be sorry for being scared, he whispered into her hair. I was terrified when I found you gone. I heard you might lose your company because of me, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. Then I'll build another one someday, Jordan said simply. But there's only one you, Amara. Only one. She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for the truth. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once, decision made. Okay, she said. Then we fight together. The courtroom felt too large and too small at the same time. Jordan sat at the front table beside Richard, his tie suddenly feeling like a noose despite having worn one nearly every day for 15 years. Across the aisle, Ms. Wilson sat with the state's attorney, files stacked neatly before them. Amara was absent, waiting in a separate room with a court-appointed advocate. The judge had decided it would be best for her not to hear the proceedings, a decision that had both relieved and troubled Jordan. He wanted to spare her the legal arguments, but hated that once again, adults would be deciding her fate without her input. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Hernandez entered. A stern-looking woman with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Be seated, she said, shuffling through papers. Case number 47293 in the matter of guardianship of Amara Johnson. She looked up, surveying the room. I've reviewed the filings from both sides. This is an unusual case. Your Honor, the state's attorney began. The facts are quite simple. Mr. Hayes took custody of a minor child without legal authority. While his intentions may have been good, he circumvented established protocols designed to protect children in the system. Judge Hernandez held up a hand. I'm aware of the procedural issues, Ms. Griffith. What I'm more interested in is why this child chose to approach Mr. Hayes in the first place, and why she ran away from her placement. We have documented concerns about the Westbrook facility, Richard interjected. Photographs of injuries, incident reports that were never properly addressed, and the state has already placed Amara on the transfer list for a different facility, Ms. Wilson countered. The issue isn't whether Westbrook has problems. Many group homes do, unfortunately. The issue is whether Mr. Hayes is a suitable guardian for this child. Judge Hernandez leaned forward. Indeed. Mr. Hayes, stand please. Jordan rose, feeling strangely vulnerable under the judge's penetrating gaze. You run a multi-billion-dollar company. You work 80-hour weeks. You travel frequently. You've never been married, have no children, and until 3 weeks ago had no relationship whatsoever with this child. Why should I believe you're prepared for the enormous responsibility of raising her? The courtroom fell silent. Jordan felt every eye upon him, judging, questioning. The practiced answers he'd rehearsed with Richard suddenly felt hollow. Your Honor, he began slowly, everything you've said is true. I'm not prepared. I don't have experience raising a child. My life before Amara was centered around my company. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But I do know what it feels like to be in the system. To be seen as a case number rather than a person. To have decisions made about your life by strangers who don't know you. He glanced at his mother sitting in the gallery, her eyes encouraging him to continue. When Amara asked if she could go home with me that night, something broke open inside me, something I'd sealed away for decades. She saw something in me that I'd forgotten was there. Jordan swallowed hard. I can't promise I'll be a perfect guardian. I'll make mistakes. But I can promise she'll never doubt that she matters, that her voice counts, that her heart is precious. The judge's expression remained unreadable. Noble sentiments, Mr. Hayes. But parenting isn't about grand gestures or emotional speeches. It's about daily sacrifice, consistency, putting a child's needs above your own. Your work demands would make that difficult. Which is why I've appointed a new CEO, Jordan said quietly. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Richard looked up in shock. This was news to him as well. When? The judge asked. This morning. The board voted to accept my recommendation of Diane Chen as interim CEO, while I take a 6-month leave of absence. Jordan straightened his shoulders. If granted guardianship, I intend to step back permanently from day-to-day operations and take a chairman position with limited hours. The judge studied him for a long moment. That's a significant career change, Mr. Hayes. Yes, Jordan agreed simply. But some things matter more than corner offices. Ms. Wilson stood. Your Honor, while Mr. Hayes's intentions seem admirable, we cannot ignore the practical concerns. He has no experience with children, particularly not children from the foster system who often come with complex emotional needs. There's also the matter of cultural considerations. Amara is a black child. Mr. Hayes is white. Has he considered the implications of that? Jordan felt a flash of anger but kept his expression neutral. Before he could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and Eleanor Hayes strode in, followed by an older black woman Jordan didn't recognize. Your Honor, Eleanor said, approaching the bench with the confidence of someone used to commanding rooms. I apologize for the interruption, but we have information relevant to these proceedings. And you are? The judge asked. Eleanor Hayes, the applicant's mother, and this is Dr. Constance Williams, director of the Harmony Center for Children. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. The Cultural Education Center. I'm familiar with your work, Dr. Williams. The elegant woman beside Eleanor nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. I've come today because Mr. Hayes approached our center 2 weeks ago seeking guidance. He recognized the importance of providing Amara with cultural connections and support that he alone couldn't provide. She handed a folder to the bailiff. Inside, you'll find the curriculum we've developed together, including community mentorship, cultural education, and regular participation in our youth programs. Judge Hernandez reviewed the papers with interest. This is quite comprehensive, Mr. Hayes. Amara deserves to grow up proud of who she is and where she comes from, Jordan said. I can't give her that perspective directly, but I can make sure she has access to a community that can. The judge turned to Ms. Wilson. Does the state have any evidence that Mr. Hayes has been anything but attentive to Amara's needs thus far? Ms. Wilson hesitated. No, Your Honor. Our home inspection was satisfactory. Amara appears well cared for and has bonded with Mr. Hayes. Then, perhaps we should hear from Amara herself, the judge decided. Ms. Wilson, please have her brought in. The courtroom doors opened again moments later. Amara entered beside her court advocate, wearing the dress Mrs. Chen had helped her pick out, navy blue with white polka dots and a red cardigan. Her hair was styled in neat braids with red beads that matched her sweater. She looked small but composed as she approached the bench. Hello, Amara, Judge Hernandez said kindly, her stern demeanor softening. Do you know why we're all here today? Amara nodded. You're deciding where I get to live. That's right. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's okay. Another nod. How do you feel living with Mr. Hayes? Amara glanced at Jordan briefly before answering. Safe. And like I matter. What do you mean by that? Amara thought for a moment. He listens when I talk. He bought me books when he saw I like reading. When I have bad dreams, he sits with me until I fall back asleep. She hesitated. And he promised never to let anyone hurt me again. The judge leaned forward. Do you understand that Mr. Hayes isn't related to you? That there are families who might want to adopt you? Families with mothers and fathers and maybe even brothers or sisters? Amara's chin lifted slightly. Jordan picked me when he didn't have to. That means more than being born into a family. She looked over at Jordan, her eyes solemn. And we're learning how to be a family together. A stillness fell over the courtroom. Even Ms. Wilson seemed affected by the simple wisdom in the child's words. Thank you, Amara, the judge said gently. You can go back with your advocate now. We'll let you know our decision very soon. After Amara left, Judge Hernandez removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. This court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. While procedure is important, it cannot overshadow what will truly serve Amara's well-being. Jordan held his breath. Mr. Hayes, your petition for temporary guardianship is granted with a 6-month review period. Relief flooded through Jordan, so powerful he had to grip the table to stay upright. However, the judge continued, This court has concerns about the circumstances under which Amara came into your care. Therefore, I'm ordering weekly visits from a court-appointed social worker for the first 3 months, enrollment in parenting classes, and continued participation in the cultural program, outlined by Dr. Williams. Yes, Your Honor, of course, Jordan agreed immediately. Ms. Wilson, I'm also ordering an investigation into the conditions at Westbrook Home based on the evidence presented here today. The judge's expression hardened. If other children are at risk, I want to know about it. Ms. Wilson nodded, looking slightly chagrined. Yes, Your Honor. Court is adjourned. The room erupted in quiet conversation as Judge Hernandez exited. Richard clapped Jordan on the shoulder. Congratulations. It's just temporary for now, but it's a huge step. Can I see her? Jordan asked, already moving toward the door Amara had exited through. In the small waiting room, Amara sat flipping through a tattered magazine. She looked up as Jordan entered, her expression cautious, afraid to hope. Hey, kiddo, he said softly. Did the judge decide? Jordan nodded, kneeling down to her level. She said you can stay with me. We have to check in with her again in 6 months, but for now you're coming home. Amara's face transformed, hope blooming into joy. She launched herself into Jordan's arms with a force that nearly knocked him over. Really? For real? For real, he promised, holding her close. There will be some changes. I won't be working as much, and we'll be taking some classes together, learning how to be the best family we can be." Amara pulled back, her eyes shining. "Can we still get a dog like we talked about?" Jordan laughed, the sound free and unburdened for the first time in years. "Yes, we can still get a dog. And can I still go to that school? The one with the big library?" "Absolutely. In fact, we should probably go shopping for school supplies this weekend. Your first day is Monday." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted by someone to the high-profile case. Camera flashes popped as Jordan emerged with Amara's hand in his. "Mr. Hayes, is it true you're stepping down as CEO? Are you planning to adopt Amara permanently? How do you respond to critics who say this is all a publicity stunt?" Jordan stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, lifting Amara into his arms so she wouldn't be overwhelmed by the crowd. "I'll only say this once," he told the reporters. "What happened in that courtroom today is private. Amara isn't a story or a headline. She's a child who deserves respect and dignity." He started to push through the crowd toward the waiting car where Mrs. Chen stood by the open door, but Amara tugged on his tie. "Wait," she whispered. "Can I say something?" Jordan hesitated, then nodded, adjusting her in his arms so she could face the reporters if she wanted to. Amara looked at the crowd of strangers with their cameras and microphones, her expression serious beyond her years. "There are lots of kids, like me," she said, her voice clear despite its softness. "Kids who need someone to take them home like Jordan took me home. Maybe you could be that someone for another kid." A hush fell over the usually boisterous press corps. One reporter lowered her camera, visibly moved. "That's all," Amara finished, turning to bury her face against Jordan's shoulder, suddenly shy again. 1 year later, Jordan stood watching as Amara knelt in the dirt, carefully patting soil around a small sapling on the grounds of the newly opened Hayes Family Center for Children. The facility, built on the site of the now closed Westbrook home, would provide temporary housing for children awaiting placement, support services for foster families, and programs to help older teens transition to independence. "Is it deep enough?" Amara asked, looking up at him with dirt smudged across her cheek. "Perfect," Jordan assured her, kneeling beside her despite his dress pants. The board meeting could wait 5 more minutes. They had settled into a new rhythm over the past year. Jordan worked 3 days a week at the office, serving as chairman while Diane thrived as CEO. The other days, he worked from home or from the center, building something even more meaningful than his tech empire. The adoption had been finalized 3 months ago, after navigating mountains of paperwork and interviews. Amara had insisted on keeping both her original last name and adding Hayes, a decision Jordan fully supported. "This way I remember where I came from and where I'm going," she'd explained with her usual wisdom. "What kind of tree is this again?" Amara asked, wiping her hands on the gardening apron Mrs. Chen had insisted she wear over her dress. "A dogwood," Jordan replied. "They're strong trees, but they need the right conditions to thrive. Kind of like people." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "It's going to get really big someday, right?" "Huge," Jordan promised. "You'll be able to bring your own kids here to see it when you're grown up." Amara smiled at the thought, then looked up at him with sudden seriousness. "I'm glad I asked to go home with you that day." Jordan's throat tightened with emotion. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. Were you scared when I asked?" "Terrified," he admitted with a laugh. "But sometimes the scariest decisions turn out to be the best ones." Amara stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "Like when you decided to be my dad instead of just a CEO?" "Exactly like that." Jordan rose, taking her small hand in his. "Ready to go inside? The ribbon-cutting ceremony will start soon." As they walked toward the gleaming new building where Eleanor waited with Mrs. Chen and a crowd of community members, Jordan felt Amara squeeze his hand. "Jordan?" "Yes?" "Thank you for letting me choose you." Jordan smiled down at his daughter, this remarkable child who had changed everything with a simple question on a rainy night. "Thank you for choosing me," he replied. Behind them, the small dogwood stood straight and proud in the afternoon sun, its roots already beginning to take hold in the earth, just as they had taken hold in each other's hearts, creating something new and strong and beautiful. a family found in the most unexpected way.